So, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the 10th meeting of the Disabilities Access and Inclusion Advisory Committee. We have the agenda that's posted on the goldenrod paper, and if you want to take a look at that, I'm going to call for, actually before I do that, I want to just acknowledge that we're meeting on the traditional lands of the Mississaugas and the New Credit and home to many diverse Aboriginal communities. Can I ask that we do an introduction of those who are in the room? This is how we generally start our meetings. I'd like to begin by having those who are sitting around the chambers to just speak into a microphone if you have one in front of you, and just clearly state your name and the division that you may be representing. And if you're media, then you can also identify the media outlet.
Good morning. My name is Mazen Aribi, ACAT Chair. I'm here as an advisor, an observer.
Good morning, Dean Milton from Wheel-Trans, TTC.
Good morning, Dino Romano, TTC Community Relations.
Matt Haig from TTC.
Good morning, Wayne Chu, Policy Development Officer, Social Development Division.
Deirdre Boyle with Shelter Support and Housing.
Melissa Wong from Councillor Kristen Wong-Tam's office.
Okay. And we're just going to go to this side of the room, and then we're going to come back into the chamber.
Lorene Bodiam, Parks, Forestry and Recreation.
Okay, great. And I'll start over here at the center. Kristen Wong-Tam, Chair of the committee.
Nicole Cormier, Equity, Diversity and Human Rights Office.
Rahima Mullah, co-chair.
Tracy O'Dell, Citizens with Disabilities, Ontario.
Wendy Porch, committee member.
Mike Layton, City Councillor for Ward 19, Trinity Spadina.
Joe Napper, committee member.
Stephanie Ozario, committee member.
Karma, committee member.
So if it's a long pause, it's mine. Martin Crisell's committee member.
Darren Cooper, committee member.
Terry Lynn Langdon, committee member.
Yin Brown, committee member, but also representing Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians.
Janice Dick, City Clerk's office.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. I want to ask for declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Are there any from the members of the committee? Okay, thank you very much. Seeing none. Great. And there are minutes that were produced from the April 19th and May 25th meeting. And can I please have a motion to confirm the minutes? Thank you very much, Terry Lynn. Okay, so let's just go through the agenda. Okay, sure, I could do that. Okay, so we're going to start on the first page here. There will be the chair's report, which I'll hold down to provide for you. Item number 2 is the recruitment strategy for equity-seeking groups, and we're going to hold that down for staff presentations as well. Item number 3 is the City of Toronto Social Procurement Program. We're going to also need to hold that down for presentations. Item number 4 is proposed Wheel-Trans eligibility requirements, and again, we're going to hold that down for presentations. Item number 5 is the Disabilities Access and Inclusion Advisory Committee Working Group recommendations, and I don't know if there's any speakers or if we need to debate this item. Sure. Do you want to hold that down?
Yeah, I feel like the issues need to be debated.
Okay.
And also, I was going to suggest or request that we do that first.
Okay, so Terry Lynn would like to hold the item. She's also going to want to time the item as the first item that we address. So we can have a vote on that if everyone is in agreement that we deal with item number 5, which is the Disabilities Access and Inclusion Advisory Committee Working Group recommendations. Everyone is in agreement that we'll deal with this matter first? Okay, so that'll be bumped to number 1. And I believe that there's a new item to be added to the agenda, and this is to receive a presentation from the Older Women's Network. Okay, so I'll just add that to the agenda. There's no disagreements here. And I want to know if there's any declarations of interest now that we've added that last item onto the agenda. Okay, Rahima? Rahima, your interest, can you state that?
I'm a committee member.
Of the OWN? Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so everyone is okay with the order paper? I'm going to deem it as adopted. Motion to adopt. Yin, thank you very much. Okay. So let's deal with number 5. Okay, Terry Lynn, you held this down. Are there questions to the staff person? You just want to speak to it? Okay, are there any members of the committee who would like to ask questions of the recommendations in the report or speak to the report? No? Okay, so I'll just call, Wendy? I just want to comment as well. Okay, so Terry Lynn to speak, and then followed by Wendy. Okay. Go ahead.
I was quite disappointed to read this particular report because I thought that a lot of suggestions had come directly from work that we had already been doing as a committee and also from the community of people with disabilities, just based on other topics that we've raised at committee level and things. The first thing that I wanted to point out is that suggested topics for working groups being just 2 things. So for the record, it's built environment and public spaces and education and awareness. My first concern about this is a really, really narrow perception and sort of inclusion of the committee and the committee's work. And I think one of, at least I hear it a lot, one of the criticisms of the AODA Act, which I feel is a misnomer, but it is the perception of the AODA Act, is that people are often concerned that we're only talking about built environment, and then I kindly explain and I direct people to policy documents and stuff, that actually it is about information and communication, and it actually is about customer services and integrated customer services and inclusion of people with disabilities, particularly in the workforce as well. And then when I say those things, and I say it very, like if coming from an informed place, people have a tendency to back off and they feel more empowered by the legislation. Having said that, I feel like having this as just a topic is going to perpetuate that view of the AODA Act and what accessibility is for in Toronto and the province. The second one about education and awareness, and again, even with the first one, my fear is that things are going to come to the committee and we're just going to be asked to sort of like click check boxes and say yay or nay to particular reports that we're seeing or social issues and concerns. And I think we are supposed to be an advocacy committee within the City of Toronto. And these issues that are on the topics not selected are huge for the disability community, right? Transportation is a huge problem in the City of Toronto. We've definitely spent a lot of time here talking about it, and we've spent a lot of time here pushing motions into the Executive Committee and into the consciousness of City Hall and different policies at the city. And yes, it's true that there are pre-existing mechanisms and things like that, but I don't know how to say this politely. In my experience, those mechanisms have been ineffective. And I think there's a lot of support and a lot of evidence that speaks to that point. In regards to housing, I know that we recently wrote some letters in support of housing for marginalized people, and I felt like that was going somewhere and people were sort of listening and hearing what we had to say about that. And we do have a housing crisis in Toronto that is disproportionately affecting individuals with disabilities in the city, and it's a huge social problem that really doesn't need to exist. In terms of policy, I agree, that might actually be too broad of a topic, but in terms of are there going to be policies that we see at the city level that we need to comment as a committee because it's not inclusive of people with disabilities? Absolutely. If we're not able to do that, we can't be effective as a committee. And information and communication, the committee has commented very thoughtfully and very progressively about information and communication since its inception, since it started, so since before I've been on the committee. And it needs to go forward because that's a community, the community that has lesser access to information and communication is part of the community that's not necessarily represented here at this committee and also on other similar committees at the city and similar working groups. In terms of employment and HR, look, I understand that we really pushed as a committee for employment and HR to be better and more effective at the City of Toronto. In the City of Toronto, employment for people with disabilities is a huge problem, right? We're talking about 49% of people with disabilities who have functional disabilities are employed, and that doesn't include women, that doesn't include people of color. Those folks have significantly lower levels of employment. And the City of Toronto has like millions and millions and millions of dollars that they're operating in the city. So if we can't get employed at the city or similar services, that is actually a problem. And services, I agree, it's kind of too broad. But part of the reason why it was suggested, and it wasn't my suggestion, but I feel like the reason it was suggested was to be in line with the customer service aspects of the AODA Act. So I'm just really frustrated that this was the outcome of the suggestions, and I hope that we can turn this around.
So, Terry Lynn, I appreciate the comments, and they're certainly full. In order for us to turn anything around, we have to move a motion.
Yes.
And generally, motions are introduced before one begins to speak, so I'd like to provide some variance to that. And I have the latitude as chair. Would you like to prepare a motion? And I just want to add, as I read the issues background of the report, members of the DAC committee were canvassed specifically for feedback to provide input for the outcome and the recommendations that are contained in the report. We can, there's a few actions here before Wendy speaks, and I want to just provide some options. We can defer the report to provide further time for committee members to provide additional comments to Nicole, and if that's agreeable, that's one way of tackling it. But I'm just a little bit nervous that we start adding new working groups and we don't have the people to back up the working groups, especially since there was some broad requests for comments and consideration of what those working groups should look like. So I'm just going to put that out there, so some things for us to consider. So we don't have to make a decision at the moment. We can also stand down the report, so we can stand down the item and come back to it with a recommendation that's a little bit clearer later on the agenda. But for now, I'm just going to allow Wendy to speak and have her 5 minutes, and then we can decide on what to do as a committee. Because right now the recommendations are to adopt the report with the recommendations contained. Wendy, please.
So thank you for that. I learned something about the order in which we should be doing things. Can I propose a motion that we defer the report for additional input from the committee members who are here? And the reason why I'm going to suggest that is I agree with Terry Lynn's comments. I'm also disappointed to see that there were only 2 working groups. I'm new to the committee, so I'm not entirely clear on how things generally go. But the 2 working groups, for the same reasons that Terry Lynn has made clear, seem to be too limited in their scope. I'm finding as a committee member, as a new committee member, particularly around issues related to transportation, which I think all agree are critical to this committee and to the community of people living with disabilities in Toronto, that the issues are quite complex, and I would prefer to have some opportunity to sit with people on the committee and to talk about the materials as they're presented to us in advance of the meeting, to have a bit of a chat in the working groups, and to form some recommendations that are more fully informed. And also, so that's my one recommendation, is around at least a transportation working group. And secondly, the question of there being no group on employment is also a concern to me. To echo some of what Terry Lynn said, employment is one of the critical issues that are facing people living with disabilities in Canada, frankly. And to say that there is no need for a working group because HR is compliant, I think simplifies the problem, overly simplifies the problem. I think that there's still a lot of scope for improvement, and I really think that the City of Toronto has the potential to be a leader in terms of the employment of people with disabilities, and to demonstrate how things like flexible work and creative accommodations can be adopted within the city as a guiding force, really, for other organizations. So I would prefer also to see at least an HR and employment working group. So those are my comments, and my motion is that consideration of the item be deferred until September 1st, 2016, so that the Disability Access and Inclusion Advisory Committee can have more input.
Motion on the floor. Is there anyone who'd like to ask questions of the mover? Anyone who'd like to speak to the motion? Anyone else who wants to speak to the item? Terry Lynn, is it a question of the mover?
Oh, I just wanted to say that I didn't see this report until last week. Is that true for everyone else?
Yes.
Okay, because
So it is standard that 5 business days before the committees meet, that the agendas are published with the reports contained.
yeah. So I'm just saying that, yes, we were asked about which committees that we would suggest, but I don't feel like there was consultation about this report until today.
Okay, so that's, I think Wendy's deferral motion can help provide that extra 3 months of time to provide consultation, 2 months of time. Yin to speak?
I'd like to know how these last two was arrived at, because I felt that our suggestions were very different, and to echo Terry Lynn's comment that if we say that all the other areas are covered under the AODA, or we have presentations on that, I feel, the built environment likewise has been fully covered in other discussions and numerous consultation meetings that I've been at. So I'd like to know what happened to our suggestions.
So, Yin, we're not at a point where we're going to have an opportunity to ask questions again. There's a motion to defer the item. I think there's going to be lots of time over the summer for members of the committee to sit down with Nicole to sort of flesh it out, to come back with a different set of recommendations that will have to be staffed and resourced, which is not a problem. But as long as everyone is aware that this item is not being adopted today, it's simply being deferred for further consultation with the working group members. And you will get your answers, Yin. You're just not going to get it immediately right now. Okay, so everyone to signify your support for the motion? Okay, so passed. Thank you. Adopted. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. So we're going to head back to item number 1, which is the chair's report. So I'll try to make it brief because we do have a very full agenda, and I want to make sure that we give the presentations a lot of time. So my chair's report is comprised of 4 major points. I've met with Michael Williams, the general manager of the city's Economic Development Committee, to discuss how the city can educate and support businesses toward AODA compliance. I've essentially asked whether or not we can create a summit to provide information for the businesses. There seems to be an information vacuum when it comes to what businesses need to do to come into compliance. It's a fairly large undertaking. We're not going to have access to all the businesses. I'm hoping that we can work with the provincial government, who has more resources with respect to information dissemination and raising awareness. So I'll continue to pursue this discussion and look at ways to engage the city's BIAs so that they can help their members understand what the AODA compliance requirements are. Secondly is recently met with John Elvidge from the city clerk's office, and we discussed how we can make our committee rooms and council chambers more accessible. The city clerk is already examining how to make it accessible, so this is not something I had to prod too hard on. They were already thinking about making those physical changes, and those changes are going to take place on the website, and you can see that they've already started to place recordings of the committee meetings on YouTube. They have an incredible archive. If you have a lot of time, you feel like burning the clock, you cannot sleep at night. That's one way to make the time go by. They'll also be reviewing council chambers in advance of the ward boundary review, and they will consider making accessibility improvements in that review as well. So we've heard from deputants and members of the public is that when they do come to committee rooms, the rooms are not equipped to accommodate access to wheelchairs or perhaps other equipment that we have in place. So this is something that they're committed to. I don't have a timeline for deliverable, but I do know that they're moving as quickly as they can. The Wheel Transformation Program, I'm going to keep this super short, my remarks, because you will be hearing from them shortly, but I can tell you that I met with the TTC and representatives who are in charge of Wheel-Trans for the transformation component on June the 24th, and I shared with them the necessities to make Wheel-Trans competitive with other services and other ride providers, and the importance of focusing the all and any improvements around the customer experience. And then the Invictus Games, as you have probably noted on the media, there's going to be some very exciting personalities and people coming to visit us in 2017. The event known as the Invictus Games is going to take place on September 24th to September 30th. We're going to see roughly 600 people who have served in the military and who are servicemen and women who have become ill or injured while in service. They're from 16 allied nations, and they're going to compete in 12 adaptive sports. So I will be meeting with the CEO, Michael Burns, in July to discuss how the City of Toronto, and in particular how the DAYAC Committee and its members can get involved. I know that during the Pan Am Games there was presentations from the Pan Am organizers who came to our committee to share with us their vision of how to get our membership involved, how to make the games more accessible, and I know that we gave them feedback. I'm hoping that between now and 2017, when the games are unveiled, we'll have those same opportunities here. And then, of course, we can go out and cheer the athletes on. So that is the conclusion of my report. I promised I'd keep it short. And, oh, actually, there was one final thing, and I just want to bring your attention to it. Councillor McConnell and I have passed a condolence motion, or we will, at the next council meeting, and this is to, of course, acknowledge the passing of Karina Lee, who many of you will probably know that she's worked as an active member of the Election Services Accessibility Outreach Network, and a very valued member of our community. She has passed, and I just wanted to let you know that there's a motion of condolence that council will pass, and those thoughts and those words will be passed along to her family. Okay, a motion to receive the chair's report. Okay, thank you, Stephanie. Wonderful. Item number 2, recruitment strategy for equity-seeking groups, and we have a presentation from staff.
Morning, everybody. My name is Jennifer Targonski, and I'm a senior HR consultant for strategic recruitment and employment services. My particular area of focus is on diversity and next generation programs. Okay. I don't know how to get that bigger on the screen. Anybody?
I think you're about to get some IT assistance here.
Okay. Hi.
Jennifer, if I can just confirm, I believe your presentation is 10 minutes long, is that correct?
Yeah, about that. Yep.
Thank you.
Oh, there we go.
So this side, it's going to be small.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll be doing a presentation on recruitment of equity-seeking groups, specifically people with disabilities this morning. Okay, so getting started here, recruitment and hiring. Just want to give you an overview as to what we're doing here at the city when it comes to recruiting equity-seeking groups. So what we're currently doing, first of all job postings contain the following language: that committed to employment and equity, the City of Toronto encourages applications from Aboriginal people, persons with disabilities, members of visible minority groups, and women. It also contains the following verbiage: in accordance with Ontario Human Rights Code, Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, 2005, and the City of Toronto's accommodation policy, accommodation will be provided in all parts of the hiring process. Applicants are required to make their needs known in advance. Recruitment and hiring continued. Diversity outreach to be included in job competition recruitment planning. And through our partnership with the city's advertising services firm, Diversity Media is present in our sourcing outreach via Nation Talk and Equitech, which I'll go into in a little bit. Interview panels are also diverse. And for example, Skype or phone interviews to accommodate people with mobility restrictions or otherwise. Other accommodations such as screen readers and use of available tools and technologies as appropriate. Current outreach initiatives. Currently, we're collaborating with community agencies to connect people with disabilities who are unemployed or underemployed to potential city job opportunities. We're attending career and job fairs to promote city opportunities and City of Toronto as employer of choice for people with disabilities. Recently, in May, we attended the People in Motion Disability Exhibition Career Fair, and we promoted city jobs to people with disabilities. We met with over 150 people at this event, and we were able to reach out to 47 people after the event, inviting them to apply to city jobs within HR, IT, project management, finance, public health, and administration type roles. These candidates will be tracked using our candidate database and applicant tracking system to follow their progress through potential competitions. For example, did they apply to any specific roles? If so, did they get an interview? How far in the process did they get? And on, so we can find out if they're actually getting through the interview process. I just want to provide you with an update on these candidates that we were able to reach out to. So of the 47 people who we reached out to, we ended up speaking to 20 to conduct a pre-screen, and from that 20, 8 people were successful during the pre-screen and will be sent off to our recruiters for any positions that they're interested in applying to. So current outreach initiatives. The city supports Local 79's annual Equity Summit for city staff and community partners. In 2016, the summit was for women in the workplace, breaking new ground. 2015 summit was for recruiters and hiring managers at the city and focused on hiring persons with disabilities at the city. 2014 summit focused on city's Aboriginal initiatives as part of the Year of Truth and Reconciliation. Currently, we're researching becoming an employment partner with the Canadian Centre for Diversity and Inclusion. They provide learning for leaders, management teams, human resources, and diversity and inclusion. And they're also a centralized source for diversity and inclusion research, data, and best practices information. Earlier this year, we participated in the Seneca College Diversity and Inclusion event in April, a networking event for employers to discuss diversity and inclusion in the workforce. Current outreach initiatives continued. City of Toronto is currently using a number of online diversity outreach channels. Equitech, which is a diversity outreach platform and broadcast service that features the city as an employer on their site. Job postings are also scraped from the City of Toronto Job Board and shared with a network of diversity organizations. LinkedIn, posting city opportunities in 9 LinkedIn diversity groups, including diversity and disability at work and professionals with disabilities. Facebook and Twitter, using our online presence to showcase diversity events that we have or will be attending. For example, posting that we were in attendance at the People in Motion event in May, and then posting pictures after the event. Current hiring initiatives. Currently, we have a partnership with Career Edge internships. Career Edge, my apologies, is an external vendor-supported paid internship program. Career Edge sources their talent from pools of recent grads, graduates with disabilities, and Canadian Armed Forces reservists. The city has a partnership with Career Edge to provide temporary paid internship opportunities for the Summer Policy Intern Program. We've had some success in this area in terms of diversity. 2 interns with the city were graduates with a disability, and we're looking into how to expand on this number. Measuring results. Count Yourself In workforce survey gives current employees opportunity to confidentially self-identify. The results of the survey will allow us to determine the outcome of our diversity outreach. The survey will set a baseline for us to determine where we need to focus our efforts going forward. We also piloted the use of voluntary self-identification forms in the city's applicant tracking system for our recruitment process. And collection of diversity data will ensure that we can effectively measure recruitment efforts and hiring outcomes. Going forward, we're currently reviewing our diversity recruitment initiatives with the aim to reinforce diversity recruitment best practices, strengthen our approach to sourcing diverse talent, and becoming the employer of choice for people with disabilities and all diverse groups. And going forward, continued, creating a streamlined process for sourcing talent at diversity events to ensure that candidates are applying to city jobs. For example, engaging candidates at events, promoting roles, tracking candidates through the recruitment process. We're undertaking regular employee surveys on workforce diversity to enable the city to implement improved workforce and talent development strategies. Continued going forward, expand the number of employee resource groups and engage members as diversity ambassadors. Continue building diversity brand online and in the community. Develop a diversity inclusive hiring strategy framework, which is currently in progress. And determining key criteria for external partnerships. Identify and build strategic partnerships with local diversity associations, academic institutions, access centers for persons with disabilities, and veterans. So one thing I just want to mention about this determine key criteria for external partnerships is that there are a number of organizations. We just need to think a little bit more strategically in terms of who we partner with. And going forward, finally here, identify, pipeline, and hire strong talent across the organization. Education is key. Currently developing a city course on equity and diversity, recruitment best practices, which should roll out to the staffing community, hiring managers, and the organization at large. And that's it.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Okay, Stephanie and then Martin.
It's just a question about some of the networks. I'm not sure if you're aware of 2 of them. One is ODIN, which is the Ontario Disability Employment Network, and the other one is JOIN, which is Job Opportunity Information Network. So I just wanted to, because they're umbrella groups, and many of the other agencies that are disability specific who provide employment services are under those umbrellas as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Martin, please.
My turn. Just wondering what your the Twitter handle is, because I only found out about the People in Motion like an hour before it actually started. So it's one of these things that if you don't know about it, you can't attend. So. Getting more information would be a great boon for me and for others as well.
So the Toronto Twitter handle is @TorontoJobs.
Okay.
Are you asking us, Jennifer, or are you telling us?
Oh, no, I'm telling you. Sorry.
Hi, sorry, maybe just to add to that, I'm Barbara Schulman, Director of Strategic Recruitment. For the People in Motion, that was not a city event, that was an event that we participated in. So although we certainly will pay attention to promoting those events that we will attend, I think it would be the organizers of People in Motion that would also need to better promote that. Yes, so we'll make a note that we profile these items on our Twitter and Facebook pages.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, Martin? Yin, and then I see Karma and Wendy.
I had a quick question, sorry, about the, on the website. I haven't checked your careers page, but I'm just wondering, has it been assessed for accessibility and all that fun stuff? And also, if it's not fully accessible, do you have an alternative path for someone who's trying to apply to a position at the City of Toronto?
Yes, through the chair, our talent application tracking system and our career page is fully accessible to my knowledge. There are also mechanisms available, supports available to applicants who are having any type of challenges as they're applying. There are help supports available to them through the process in the event that there is a challenge.
Is there a follow-up question, Martin? Okay. Yin, please.
Hi, I'd like to know the results or the actual findings of all your good, initiatives. So you've quoted quite a few. So I'd like to know what, like you mentioned, one good example was, how you're tracking the 40 or so that you guys connected with at the fair, at the People in Motion place. But I'd like to know if you can present the findings of the other initiatives that you have.
Yeah, can I go ahead? So currently, this is a work in progress. It's a very fluid, recruitment strategy that we're working on. We will be attending a number of events. There have been some that we've attended after the People in Motion that we're going through the process of reaching out to candidates. But we don't have those results just yet. This is a new process that we're implementing in order so that we can track these candidates.
My follow-up question is, for example, if you decide to, connect with some external bodies like Equitech, you said? Mm-hmm. Well, things like how many applicants actually end up, applying with disabilities, and what kinds of disabilities? Because for the blind and partially sighted, as I forgot his name, Derek mentioned, we don't get this information, and it's so we don't even know Equitech, so how are you reaching out, making sure that all disability groups or the disability groups who are employable are reached? I like to know, just facts and figures instead of saying we put a tagline or a few sentences at the end of our job ads, that's good, but I like to see, as how many are reached.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one thing that we are doing currently speaks to exactly that, is that we're doing more outreach to specific organizations that work with people with disabilities so that we can, in fact, track potential candidates as they come in through a separate tracker, for lack of a better word, that wouldn't necessarily be the same as the applicant tracking system or e-recruitment system where the jobs would be posted normally. So this is much more outreach into the community and following those candidates that come through different organizations that we work with.
Yin, Any other questions? Okay, sure. Just to acknowledge the order that I have of questioners, Karma, Wendy, and then Tracy. Karma.
Hi, I just want to say thank you very much for this presentation. And my two questions are, what is being done by the city to encourage internal and external partners to adopt similar measures? And my second question is, it's great that you're recruiting, but what is being done afterwards to retain and promote? Thank you.
Sure. Maybe I'll start with the first part. So I think in your question, you might be referring to what we're doing to help other external organizations in terms of their role. So we're focused, we represent the HR division at the City of Toronto, and our focus and energy is on recruitment for the Toronto Public Service. We don't play a role in providing guidance advice to employers outside of the City of Toronto, outside of our organization.
Okay, I was just meaning, like, for example, like the TTC, are you also encouraging them to adopt?
Okay, that's a good question. So the TTC has their own HR division. Again, we provide HR advice, guidance, support services programs to the Toronto Public Service, generally not to the agencies. So they would have the same expectations for their own individual organizations, but we can only speak to the initiatives that we're doing for the Toronto Public Service. Okay. And then, sorry, your second part of your question?
It's about retaining and promoting.
So in terms of retaining and promoting, we are currently looking into this. We're working with diversity, equity, and human rights as well, to figure out how we can work together in order to create strategies internal to the organization.
Wendy.
Thank you also for the presentation, very interesting. And I don't know if this is a fair question, because I think that your presentation focuses quite clearly on outreach around retention, right? So I do have some suggestions perhaps in the comments around other organizations that you could talk to as well. But again, and kind of to follow up on Karma's question, one of the things that we know is that even if you get somebody with a disability in the door and they sit down for an interview, they're unlikely to be hired. And so what happens in terms of, and what can you speak to, in terms of the supports that are provided to the hiring folks, so if it's a manager, to give them a broader sense of the abilities of the candidate that they see before them and actually hire the person. So it's not promotion and retention, although I think those are critical things too, and I would like to hear more about that as well. But even just the hiring step, we know a lot of people actually fall out of the equation at that point. What kind of data do you have? What kinds of supports do you provide to people who are hiring?
So I think you raised some very valid points, and we know that the success of a diversity hiring strategy, and in particular a hiring strategy that focuses on people with disabilities, it goes well beyond outreach. And we know that education is a very big part of it, and I think that Jennifer does refer to that in her presentation, that we will be embarking on a broadened education process in the organization for hiring managers and people working in HR and strategic recruitment in particular, and hiring managers across the organization so that they fully understand their obligations, the process, supports in place in the organization in order to be able to accommodate people with disabilities, not only through the recruitment process, but beyond. And I think as an organization, we're quite fortunate. We do have some very good structures in place already. So we take full responsibility for our need to accommodate employees. We have employee health, we have employee disability management, functions in our organization to work directly with divisions to make necessary accommodations for employees, whether it's for permanent accommodation or temporary accommodations that arise. There are other supports through our employee health area. We also work closely from an organization development perspective to understand operational needs. What do we need to do to tailor supports in a particular area? And finally, when we talk about promotion, when we speak about recruitment, we're not talking about recruitment just for external individuals. So our process covers all recruitment, whether it's for internal or external applicants. And in fact, a lot of the vast majority of our recruitment in the organization is done internally because we're such a large organization. So when we speak to the efforts and initiatives that we are undertaking, it is not just for external people, but it would be for existing employees and employees who have disabilities, employees who have need for permanent accommodations. And we have processes in place already that enable us to do that.
Thank you for that. Can I ask a follow-up question? So you'd mentioned that you're going to be embarking on a new process for hiring managers, a new educational process for hiring managers. Could you tell me a little bit more about that? When does it start? What are you planning?
We're currently working on it right now. There will be a presentation that I'm going to pilot in September, and then we'll be hopefully get some feedback on it, and then put it out there to at least the strategic recruitment group right now.
Okay. Terry Lynn. Oh, sorry, Terry Lynn, I apologize. Actually, Tracy is next.
Yeah. I just had a question about accommodation for employees with disabilities and whether you use a centralized approach for funding accommodations, or whether each department is expected to absorb that within their own budget.
That's a good question, and it is one that's been, I think, debated a number of times. I believe at the moment it is still within the division, the individual divisions that are required to accommodate, to fund any associated costs. I'm quite certain, but not 100%.
Thank you. Terry Lynn, please.
I just wanted to know how long the city has been working with Career Edge in particular.
So Career Edge, I believe that it's the summer internship program. I think this is the 3rd year, but I'm not certain about that either. But we have been working with them for a number of years, just on other internship opportunities.
Follow-up question? Okay. Any other questions? Karma.
Well, I was just wondering, maybe this is not a question, but earlier you had stated that most of your recruitment is internal, right? Now, the rate of unemployment amongst people with disabilities is quite high, okay? And I know within the federal government, they had a report. It was the Federal Senate report on employment equity. And one of the things that they saw within the federal government was the fact that, the unemployment rate remains high, and, but at the same time, they saw that when you're looking at the statistics, like age-wise and all of those things, they noticed that majority of the people with disabilities seem to be only those who are like 45 and above, right? So it seems more that the disabled that you guys are counting are more likely due to age rather than, somebody such as myself, right? So I don't know if, I don't know how you guys go about, counting then, if what you're saying is truly going to be 100% accurate, that you really are recruiting, disabled. So.
So as we enhance our ability to gather the information from applicants and employees, we'll be in a better position to be able to, I don't know, kind of analyze better what the demographics show. We don't have that, and we wouldn't have that information. My comment in terms of doing a lot of our recruitment internally is largely based on the fact that we're a unionized organization, so almost 90% unionized in terms of the positions, and therefore in following the collective agreements, we have an obligation in most cases to post the jobs internally first. So that results in a lot of the positions for, being filled internally. But certainly, we are going to the streets. What I can't tell you then is the demographics of those people that have identified as a person with disabilities. But it is something that going forward, we could look to see whether we could slice it thinner to get more, to analyze more and have a better sense of what groups might be underrepresented. So if it's youth with disabilities or younger, certain cohorts, we could certainly look to see if we can gather that.
Great, thank you. If there are no more questions, oh, Joe, go ahead.
I'm curious, do you have statistics on what percentage of Toronto's workforce would be considered to be in a disability category?
So I think I'd look to my colleague from the Office of Equity, Diversity and Human Rights. Maybe they could answer that. That would be census data that I think that information would come from. Yeah, I don't have that information.
I think Nicole's answer is that she doesn't believe that that's available. Perhaps, Joe, you could ask the question of whether, what is the percentage or what are the numbers of City of Toronto employees if they choose to disclose and identify that they have a disability? What are our numbers internally in the corporation?
Yeah, I think that's what I was asking poorly.
Sorry. So again, I look to my colleagues. The Office of Equity, Diversity and Human Rights has undertaken a workforce survey, but they are still in the process of analyzing the information and have not yet reported out on this. So unfortunately, we don't have the information to report on. I believe they are anticipating reporting out later this year.
I think Nicole could probably provide a comment on this.
I apologize, I can only provide you a high-level comment at this time because my colleagues on the equity and diversity side are managing this, the particular surveys. I believe some limited amount of information was collected at this time, and it's a survey that I believe is done every 2 years, so the plans are to increase the data collection as we go forward. But I believe that historically there may have been some concerns about privacy issues, which may have delayed the steps towards collecting that data, but that is definitely part of the long-term goals.
Any other questions? Okay, to speak? We're going to, at some point in time, need a motion to adopt the recommendations of the report, or also make some, or actually just to receive the report for information. Yin, and then Terry Lynn, and Wendy. Yin, go first, please.
Okay. I'd just like to give you feedback from an actual job seeker such as myself that's blind. I've been to your annual fair at the library, apparel salon, several times, and there has been really no sensitivity to people with disabilities, especially the blind. Everybody hands me a piece of paper, even though I tell them I can't read it, and they don't know what to do with me. In the conversations, they'd really display the attitude that they don't expect me to be applying. They just chat about, how wonderful the city is becoming accessible. So, and I've been to the Employment Center on Wellesley Street. I believe that is a a city-funded employment center, and again, they do not have a screen reading software. The employer, the staff there, they don't really know how to handle me. So I think going forward, as you've mentioned, definitely I like to hear back in the next report, and not maybe a whole year later, maybe 6 months later, just how are the initiatives being rolled out? How specifically, how many hiring managers are attending or getting trained or being educated? What initiatives are there to make sure that your information is going out to the communities? And I speak especially for the blind and partially sighted, because we don't get the information.
Thank you very much, Ian. Terry Lynn, and then Wendy.
I really appreciate this report because I know that I've been pushing for just information period on these kinds of hiring practices for a while, and I know I became aware of, I first requested statistics specifically 4 years ago, and I know this committee has been pushing for statistics for a few years. It is very reasonable to expect that the city be doing that. I checked last night. There's no way to say on your application if you have a disability or not. That would be, I would think, the first step. Also, I've been hearing in the community that when people say they need support with an application, they don't get a timely response, or they don't get a response at all. And I've been hearing that consistently, so that's problematic. But I really, truly, I think I have more information now about initiatives that are happening in the city in terms of employment equity, and I think I needed to hear that, so that's good. I asked about Career Edge specifically because in all of these statistics, except for a report that was published in 2001, disability starts at age 25, right? So they're looking at age 25 to 64, right? And that bothers me because there are young people that would or could or should be in the employment sector at, say, 15 to the age of 24, and they're not included in statistics, right? Career Edge, in large part, addresses the employment concerns of young people with disabilities. And you did speak to Career Edge in the report, and I wanted to know how long you've been part of Career Edge, because frankly, I think, had I been working with an organization for a 3-year period, and if 2 young people with disabilities get hired, that's not a huge success rate. You know what I mean? I really do feel like there's a lot to be improved in that way. And the other, I think, Karma, thanks so much for your comment, because there is a lot of research as well, and I think Wendy was trying to point to it also, that people with disabilities generally have a harder time if they're trying to get hired when they are disabled. When people become disabled and they've already been in the workforce for a number of years, they do have a bit of an easier time transitioning and things. I'm not saying it's not difficult. I'm sure it's plenty difficult. But if you're in an organization that does have a union, that does have benefits, that's a bigger organization and things like that, those workers then have the opportunity to stay in their jobs. Because actually, employment and retention in terms of disability is higher, much higher than the able-bodied counterparts, so to speak, right? It's not difficult to retain workers with disabilities at all, and research shows that. But what is hard is we don't get promoted, which is fascinating, and I feel it highlights discrimination. So I just thank you for the report. Please do continue to work on this. And I was quite disappointed to hear that even though you've been with Career Edge for approximately 3 years, that it's resulted in 2 hirings.
Great, thank you very much, Terry Lynn. Wendy to speak.
Hello. So I have a few recommendations as well. One of them is around the, and this is why I've been asking about it specifically, around the educational tool that you're developing for hiring managers. And I wonder if I could recommend, and I don't know how to do this, so I'm just going to say it and we can figure it out, that this committee be viewed as a resource for that project. I'd be very interested to be able to see what you develop and to have an opportunity as a committee to provide some feedback on that, and also the understanding of the rollout and how you're planning to evaluate it. In particular, coming back to what Terry Lynn said, the hiring piece is really critical, right? So retention is a different issue, accommodation is a slightly different issue, but for a person with a disability to actually get their foot in the door is a big challenge. So in whatever way, I think as a committee, and certainly me as an individual, can support you in that, in terms of the outreach work that you're about to undertake around hiring people with disabilities, please engage with the committee. The second thing I wanted to add is just to, when you're thinking about people with disabilities, not to think narrowly about only disabilities that you can see. So a lot of the work that I do at the Canadian Working Group on HIV and Rehabilitation is with people who live with episodic disabilities. So that can include HIV, that can include people who are living with MS, epilepsy, arthritis, diabetes, so things that wax and wane. And when you're formulating your educational tool, to also think about that broader view of people with disabilities. And when you're doing your outreach in terms of your recruitment strategies, there are many chronic illness groups that represent people who are living with episodic disabilities as well that you might like to consider connecting with. And thirdly, I just want to touch on what's been said around statistics. And I'm not entirely clear on what the statistic collection strategy is. I'm not clear on what you're collecting, how you're collecting it, why you're collecting it, or when that could be made available to us. But in whatever capacity, we can start to have numbers that are attached to these particular things. In particular, the hiring of people living with disabilities, I'd be very interested in seeing that.
Great, thank you very much. Anyone else to speak? Karma.
Well, I was just going to say that, again, you guys are doing a really wonderful job, but I would also look at the type of employment that you're offering to people with disabilities, because I know a lot of times it tends to be precarious work, so part-time or contract. And also just to look, yes, I understand that it is a unionized environment. I'm also from a unionized environment, and I'm an active union member. And I can tell you that as an active union member, a union is all about social justice. And so, maybe permanent employees, they will have the first shot, but there are a lot of external opportunities that you can, give to people with disabilities. And I think it'd be great to see what the numbers are exactly on that matter. And also, as some other people have said earlier, maybe one of the places that you can really start recruiting would be at the offices for students with disabilities at various universities, because I know that a lot of students are always looking for jobs, and a lot of the jobs, like for students, with disabilities, they're not very good jobs at all, right? So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And Tracy to speak.
Thank you. I have a couple of comments. One, I was interested in the subtitle of your presentation because it was about equity-seeking groups. And I think it should be turned around so that it's really the city that's doing the seeking, right? And trying to enhance the diversity and the inclusion aspects of the workforce within the city. So I just wanted to say that off the top. And I support, the things that other people around the table have said. I'm not going to repeat it. But I do think that when it comes to people with disabilities coming into the workforce, whether they're coming in as a student or whether they're coming in as someone who's acquired a disability or through some other means, I think it's a matter, and this could be perhaps part of the training and sensitivity training for managers, but to really look at people for their potential more so than always their experience, right? Because like some students, for instance, have had the privilege to be able to do lots of extracurricular things and work part-time and do other things, whereas someone with a disability may have to focus solely on their education in order to get through and do well in school. So they may not appear to stack up as well, right? So out of all the people that you met at the fair, that there was 8 that you're recommending to go on to another step, and out of that 8, will any of them make it through? Will depend on whether people can see their potential, perhaps, versus their experience.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you, Tracy. Anyone else to speak? Yin and Terry Lynn, you want to speak again? All right, okay. Yin's going to speak, and I'm just going to be reminding committee members of time. Go ahead, Yin.
Just another point, I have gone on to this website, the city website, I have applied to city jobs, and it is so complicated, and it is not 100% accessible. A lot of edit, boxes and, the choosing choices. I needed a sighted person to do that for me. So I think revisiting that and actually, again, have an end user test it out, that would be great.
Great. Terry Lynn.
I just wanted to speak to Tracy's point again, just because there's this really interesting report that came out from the Ministry of Children and Youth Services, and it's called We Have Something to Say. And it's a report put out by working groups of young people with disabilities. And one thing that they do speak to is lack of employment in their experience, like opportunities for employment. They also speak to discrimination and lack of opportunities in the education system, right? So I just wanted to remind people that it's all connected and related to just historical oppression within the disability community, right? The fact that given our history, integration into the educational system is so young. It's such a new idea, and people with disabilities are still struggling with that as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Any others to speak? Okay, I'm just going to leave with some final thoughts, and I don't think I want to take very long. The Toronto Employment Survey that is supposed to encapsulate and to collect some very rich data for us to reflect upon, to understand who is working, who's a member of the Toronto Public Service family. I think that data is absolutely crucial. I think it's very important for us to dig as deep as possible so we can get good disaggregated data, because it's going to be troubling for me to understand where are we going if we don't know where we are right now. And I know that the Equity, Diversity, Human Rights Office did a very good job by holding an equity summit in late 2015, where we brought in about 200 HR managers for the City of Toronto, sat them all down, and basically went through a full-day symposium around hiring practices and recruitment and retention and promotion of people living with disabilities. And I think that the feedback from the HR managers at that time was that was a very rich experience for those who were in attendance. So I would like to see this office, and under your initiatives that you are outlining today in your presentation, is to do more of that, because I gathered that there was a real thirst and hunger to have the skills in order for them to do a better job of recruiting and recruiting from diverse populations, including people living with disabilities. So I'm going to move to receive this report for information, and with that conclude by thanking you for coming out and providing this very rich information to our committee. We'll see you again, no doubt. Okay, thank you very much. Item number 3, the City of Toronto Social Procurement Program, and we do have a presentation from staff. I believe it's Wayne Chu. Hi, Wayne. Wayne, I think your presentation is approximately 10 minutes? Okay, great, because you can tell this committee wants to ask questions. Okay.
Well, good morning, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about the City of Toronto's new social procurement program. My name is Wayne Chu. I am a Policy Development Officer in the city's Social Development, Finance, and Administration Division, and was the project manager and policy lead on the development of the program for the past year. Since May 2013, staff from multiple divisions, including my division, Social Development, the Purchasing Materials Management Division, Employment and Social Services, and Economic Development, along with other divisions, have been working together to develop a social procurement program that is sustainable, effective, and complements the range of purchasing and employment supports and services that the city offers. For those who are unfamiliar with the concept, social procurement is the practice of using an organization's purchase of goods and services to create positive social and economic outcomes for communities and residents when buying goods and services. Simply put, the City of Toronto buys a lot of things. On average, the city awards approximately $1.8 billion worth of contracts every year. And this does not include our agencies such as TTC or TCHC, which have larger capital investments in many times. Social procurement is about leveraging even a small proportion of that large spend to create economic opportunities for people experiencing economic disadvantage, systemic discrimination, and barriers to equal access. So in May, City Council unanimously approved the City of Toronto Social Procurement Program, which establishes and supports programs to embed social procurement requirements in city purchasing. As I mentioned, staff have been working on this for some time, and is a practice really that we have been pursuing and utilizing for over a decade, including in our original Strong Neighborhoods strategy. However, social procurement was not something that was embedded into ongoing normal operating procedure. This has changed with the passage of the social procurement program. The program sets out a policy for staff to follow, and it also identifies necessary support structures to ensure that these new policies function well in practice. It turns an ad hoc process into a systemic process embedded in all of our procurement. Why do we want to do this? We want to do this for several different reasons. At a high level, by procuring goods and services in an intentional way, public institutions can use the same dollars to achieve operational goals, drive innovation and competition in our supply chain, and improve the social and economic well-being of residents, all at the same time using the same dollars. This program is a key initiative of our poverty reduction strategy and our broader efforts to create community benefits and build community wealth. Through the program, we're trying to achieve two specific goals. The first goal is supply chain diversity. We want to increase the diversity of our supply chain by providing diverse suppliers, which are businesses owned, controlled, and managed by equity-seeking communities, as well as social enterprises. We want to provide them with equitable access to competitive city procurement. So, for example, when we purchase catering for the multitude of events that staff hold, we can purchase coffee, for example, from social enterprises or other diverse suppliers. When we need printing, we can get printing done by diverse businesses owned by equity-seeking communities such as people with disabilities or Aboriginals people, etc. These approaches allow diverse suppliers to grow their businesses, encourage entrepreneurship within marginalized communities, and sustain positive economic outcomes in Toronto. The second goal is workforce development. We want to increase the number of employment, apprenticeship, and training opportunities leveraged for people experiencing economic disadvantage, including those from equity-seeking communities. For example, when the city invests in capital infrastructure, when it builds a building, for example, we can use the opportunity to also create jobs for people who are unemployed or underemployed. When we're procuring professional services, such as IT services, we can ask vendors to also support training programs for people who are distant from the labor market. The goal is to provide individuals with sustainable pathways to employment using the dollars that we are already spending and the staffing up that we are already doing. So how does this work in practice? For supply chain diversity, there are two approaches that we are taking. For low dollar value purchasing, so divisional purchase orders under $50,000, we are requiring all buyers to make an attempt to include at least one quotation from a certified diverse supplier when getting their standard three quotations. And in doing so, we will improve access to what is often seen as a very closed-off purchasing process. The second approach is for open competitive procurement over $50,000. And for those, we're really talking about things, for example, in the millions of dollars in value. For that procurement, we often put out requests for quotations, requests for proposals, tenders. In this type of procurement, we are encouraging bidders and proponents to adopt a supply chain diversity program in their own organizations as part of requests for proposals where it's not, the decision to go with a certain vendor is not based entirely on cost, and where we can evaluate their proposals, we can award points to proponents who have or will implement a supply chain diversity policy in their own enterprise. For workforce development, we are following roughly this process. Then there's more details which is detailed in our report. The first is to go through the procurement plans of all of our divisions and identify suitable procurement over $5 million of value. We are going to look at projects that are suitable, have sufficient reach, volume of opportunities, and feasibility for workforce development opportunities. The reason why we are choosing projects over $5 million in value is we believe through our experience and through our development process that those are the projects that have sufficient benefits relative to the cost to administer the program. The second step, once we have identified the procurement, is to embed requirements in the procurement documents. So vendors will be required to, at a minimum, to designate a liaison, to commit to regular meetings with staff from the city to develop workforce development initiatives, maintain records to monitor progress and outcomes, and make public the workforce development plan so the public is aware of what is happening. For RFPs, we will be awarding points to vendors who propose good workforce development programs. And finally, once we tender the contract, once we sign the contract, start the process of creating the training and employment opportunities. So businesses who are doing work for the city can employ customized recruitment strategies to reach targeted populations, can create training and work-based learning opportunities, such as paid internships, engage in targeted registered apprenticeship programs such as Hammerheads in the construction industry, and subcontract out to social enterprises who often have their own workforce development programs. There is a great potential for large impact through this. The thing that I often emphasize when talking about this program is that we don't actually have to leverage a lot of our procurement spend to have a great amount of impact. To illustrate, when you compare our procurement to our annual community grants allocation, we see that, again, as I mentioned, we award $1.8 billion of contracts every year. If even 5% of that spend was leveraged for social procurement benefits, that would far exceed in value the annual community grants allocation that we have at the city of $47 million every year. I also want to emphasize that it's not just about a policy. Our program identifies 4 core components of work that have to be completed, and staff are currently in the implementation phase, figuring out how this will actually be implemented on an ongoing basis. So I've outlined the policy in terms of what we're going to be doing. Staff will be developing the specific procedures that each division will follow when reaching out to diverse suppliers as part of the low dollar value procurement. We're also going to be developing guidance for our divisions on how to select suitable procurement over $5 million in value for workforce development. So the idea there is to provide some guidance on what a good opportunity looks like for diverse suppliers and people who are distant from the labor market. We're going to be identifying projects that will be tendered or procured in 2017. And we will be embedding social procurement requirements in that procurement, so you'll start to see things coming out next year. And overall, provide guidance on what a good workforce development opportunity looks like. We're going to be developing templates, lists, guides, and toolkits, including working with partners to develop a supplier certification process for businesses owned by persons with disabilities. Currently, there is supplier certification from 4 organizations: the Canadian Aboriginal and Minority Supplier Council, Women Business Enterprise Canada, the Canadian Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce, and the Social Purchasing Project for Social Enterprises. There is currently a gap for people with disabilities, and we are working with community partners. We are going to be bringing on internal support. We have a staff person that we're going to be hiring to start to liaise with various communities. And finally, we're going to be working with external partners to build capacity for vendors to participate in city procurement and for institutions to embed social procurement in their own organizations. So that is the program, and I look forward to your questions and comments.
Great, thank you very much, Wayne. Do we have any questions for Wayne regarding the social procurement program? Darren.
I'm just curious, in terms of your procurement process, how do you ensure that the successful component, their end product, is accessible? For example, in my organization, any RFP, bid, or tender that is published, there is statement within the general terms and conditions that mandates that proponent to provide the end product as an accessible product. I'm thinking specifically of a consultant's report. So is there anything like that in Toronto?
This is separate from the social procurement program, but as an institution, we are we do have to follow AODA requirements, and the City of Toronto's commitment to AODA at a strategic level is significant. And so, as part of procurement, the goods and services that vendors provide, they would have to provide goods and services in an accessible way. Obviously, depending on what that good and service is, that would change what we're talking about.
Yin, you have questions? And Wendy?
2 questions. This is really exciting. I'd never heard of this initiative, but in your team, is it currently demonstrating the diversity? Basically, is your team made up of women, Aboriginals, persons with disabilities right now? Because you got to model what you want the whole city to implement. Secondly, when you have developed that I forget the word you used, the supplier policy or something for the disability group, can we also have the opportunity to give input or look at it?
So to your first question, I would say that our team is an interdivisional team, and so we are relying on the staff resources of the Social Development Division, Employment and Social Services, and Purchasing. We're working with Economic Development. We're working with staff from Shelter. So in terms of a dedicated staff resource, that's me. But I would say that we are working with everyone in the city, and so the broader team, as it were, reflects the existing diversity of our staff, which is diverse. I mean, I don't have the specific numbers on that. For your second question, The discussions, absolutely, there is opportunity to provide input. The discussions are very preliminary right now. And so what this supplier certification organization could look like is very much up in the air. And so absolutely, this is a good time to provide input, whether through me or through organizations that are working on this.
Great, thank you very much, Ian. And Wendy, questions?
I think this is great. It's very exciting. My question for you, though, is just one more around clarification. So how much of what you've outlined there is mandatory, and how much of it is voluntary? Because I noticed in a few, the wording was encourage the use of. So could you maybe clarify that for me?
For various, so this policy has to fall within a broader legislative framework that guides procurement. So some things have to be, some things we can make mandatory, some things we cannot at this point. So currently, supplier diversity, it is mandatory for staff. Well, once we have the procedures, it will be mandatory for staff to reach out. For larger procurement, we are going to encourage larger vendors to embed supplier diversity in their own enterprises until such time that we have better data to understand the implications of a mandatory requirement. For workforce development, there will be some mandatory requirements, as I outlined, such as meeting with staff, to share publicly plans, to share data on their work so we can contract manage. But we also are, we want to drive creative solutions, and so we're also asking vendors to propose creative solutions. And so that would be up to them.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Stephanie, please.
Sure. Could you just say a little bit more about which community partners you're working with regarding the diversity, the certified diversifier?
Right. So we're working with again the existing supplier certification organizations, CAMC, WeBe Canada, CGLC, and the Social Purchasing Project, who are providing advice. The organization Adaptability Canada is looking at creating an organization, so we're providing advice. However, we're not leading that. The idea here is that we do not want to be in the business of dictating how each community sets up their supplier certification organization. We just want to make sure that their organization is compatible. So Adaptability Canada is leading the charge, but also the supplier certification organizations, the Rick Hansen Foundation is also involved. Like I said, though, this is very preliminary, and so there are no formal partnerships right now.
Okay, any other questions? No? Okay, anyone to speak to the matter? Okay, Yin.
I understand you don't go into the nitty-gritty of procurement. It's up to each department, but I do want to echo what the previous committee member mentioned, that when we, when the city acquires a service or a product, I guess, a product or something that it has to be really accessible. And again, for the blind and partially sighted, I'm speaking because that's the one I know well. The previous time when the Toronto City was looking into a election platform, online platform, it was just totally inaccessible, and they had to disband it halfway through. So it's a whole lot of waste of money and time and energy. So again, somewhere, I know AODA, has certain criteria, but really has to be well tested out before we even, give them the money to your contractors. Thanks.
Joe, to speak.
Thank you for the report. I think it's a great initiative that the city's undertaking. Whatever growing pains you'll have to go through, I assume you'll work through that, but I just hope that it does work out well, because I think it's a great way, but for the city to sort of drive, drive the diverse, as you're putting it, diverse vendor opportunities, and drive the employment chain for individuals with diversity. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you. So if there's no more speakers, then I'd like to thank Wayne for his time, for coming before the committee. This is really exciting news. I think it's also a great new direction for the City of Toronto to be able to leverage our extraordinary buying power. $1.8 billion is no small amount to make sure we can actually achieve multiple outcomes and social objectives. So we are looking forward to seeing the results of that. You say 5% actually produce is the equivalent of $47 million of grant dollars. I can only imagine, what the actual impact and effect will be if we get to even 50% and 100%, which I think is the ultimate goal. So thank you, and I'd like to move to that we receive this report for information, and we're going to thank you, Wendy. We're ready to move on to our next item. Thank you, Wayne. Okay, so this is a good one, and it's a big one. We always like to talk about Wheel-Trans, and here they are, our friends from TTC. Item number 4, proposed Wheel-Trans eligibility requirements. Eve Wiggins, who's the head of Wheel-Trans, is going to provide us with a presentation. And I'm just going to advise members if there's any specific recommendations, just to start preparing your thoughts. I suspect there will be on this particular item. I don't know if you'd like to move some motions or perhaps send a message back to the board of the TTC, all the commissioners. I'm sure will be very interested in hearing what our committee has to say. So if you want to think about that and start preparing any language that you want to send, I know the clerk will probably appreciate seeing it in advance, so we're not doing some last-minute scramble. Eve, ready? Thank you. Good morning.
Am I on now? Okay.
Yes.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair, for this opportunity. Thank you, committee, once again, for this opportunity to bring you the next step. And last time you left us with many questions, and so we took away your questions, and we've included in this presentation some of the answers to the questions that we were asked last time. We look forward to building on that presentation and sharing the progress that we've made to date. We're here as part to continue with ongoing engagement with this committee and keep you apprised of where we are on the 10-year journey, and to address your questions and to discuss in greater detail the changes to eligibility. So this slide details with the fact that Wheel-Trans followed a formal, rigorous strategic planning process to identify what we needed to do. We set out on what is our mission, our vision, and set strategic objectives that would achieve the mission and the vision, and then how we would broadly, as a strategy, we put that together, achieve the vision and mission, and then the individual initiatives that would bring us to where we wanted to get to. So our mission is how we support the community, and that is as part of a fully accessible TTC. We provide barrier-free, accessible service that is efficient, reliable, and available. And our vision, what we strive for, is an accessible transit service that ensures dignity, spontaneity, fairness, and freedom of travel for all customers. Our aspirational goal is to allow all customers to utilize all components of the TTC at any time throughout an accessible transit system. So we identified the vision and support for how we're going to achieve it. Wheel-Trans has then identified what we need to do through 5 strategic objectives. Our first is a new service model, and that's at the core of what we're doing and at the core of the other 4 objectives. Our customer base is growing dramatically and rapidly, and as we expand our services, we must reflect the revised vision of disability. Formerly physical mobility, now we need to include all forms of disability as eligible for Wheel-Trans service. We need to make sure the community understands how they can support these changes. Community engagement is critical, and that's why we're being very consultative right at the beginning of this process. This change will not just impact the customer, it will also change how Wheel-Trans operates. And we need to educate and support our Wheel-Trans staff, as well as all TTC staff. We also must operate within the constraints of our budget, so we must wisely invest in those initiatives that will reach and achieve the greatest benefit. And consistency across the GTA is essential, and that we are working with our other transit partners across the GTHA to achieve the same vision. So our strategy includes a series of 13 interconnected initiatives that will transform delivery, customer interface, and organizational support of Wheel-Trans to a more modern, efficient, and integrated service partner. In developing the strategy, we are ensuring we're doing it with full consultation and buy-in at every stage, and we've worked very closely with the TTC's Advisory Committee on Accessible Transit, ACAT, as well both the ACAT Wheel-Trans Subcommittee and the larger ACAT Committee. And Wheel-Trans continues to involve ACAT at every stage as the program moves through implementation and to execution, including ensuring their active input on the communication strategy, as well as any operational changes that are required at Wheel-Trans. So our timeline is that we are at the beginning of this exciting transformation. And the first step is the change to eligibility to make sure we are in alignment with AODA guidelines. The next major activity is to pilot the family of services concept, and we are still formulating the plan and detailed timeframe to address the other initiatives. It will be an ongoing process and one we intend to continue to apprise you on as we move through. So where we are right now is we've identified the major milestones for 2016. We developed the 10-year strategy in 2015 and presented it at the TTC board, and it was accepted by the TTC board in February of 2016. We developed proposed eligibility changes in line with AODA, and we developed proposed application and appeal processes. And right now we're in public consultation and that we reviewed through a human rights and diversity lens. We made sure we consulted with our ACAT committee. We consulted with TTC staff physicians, and we're doing extensive stakeholder engagement and consultation. And if you want, I can answer at the end how many, the different groups that we've been to and met and still continue to meet with. We're also working with the GTHA Transit Partner Agreement to work towards the common standards. We're presenting all of the findings and our recommendations for new eligibility criteria this September. And then the eligibility will launch sometime after that, obviously in time for January 1, 2017. We hope to get it in sooner so that we can get going. And that existing customers, we have to develop a fair re-registration process so that they can also be eligible for family of services trips. And then we'll start on our family of services pilot approximately 6 months after that, using a small collection of customers and specific routes that we deem fully accessible. So our eligibility goals are about supporting the expanded number of Toronto citizens eligible for Wheel-Trans under Ontario legislation, offer our customers greater equity, freedom, and spontaneity of travel through improved Wheel-Trans and accessible conventional system, and focus on new customers first. We need to bring in all of those customers that we didn't consider before, and then reassess current customers over a 3-year period using the same criteria to ensure everyone is treated equitably and ensure that the Wheel-Trans service is available for all those who need it. So when we look at what the equity really means, and I'm sure I don't need to tell this room that, but if we compare it against equality, equality means treating everyone the same, and we want to make sure our focus is on equity to make sure everyone gets the access, that we provide the level of service individually that each person needs to ensure that they achieve the same result and they get the same access to opportunities. The conditional category, as provided by AODA, gives us the opportunity to leverage the conventional transit system, those parts of it that is accessible, with the net result of achieving freedom and spontaneity of travel. The current Wheel-Trans offering is 2 categories: unconditional, unable to use conventional transit at all, and temporary, that they only need it for a certain period of time. When we add conditional, we can leverage the conventional system and again give that freedom of travel and greater reaching distance and speed that customers are looking for. This gives more options to help people reach and interact with and connect with the conventional system, but ultimately it's not about that, it's about getting them to where they need to go. So to answer some of your other questions, this eligibility initiative, earlier in the presentation I presented a high-level view of the 13 initiatives. Each initiative identifies a number of actions that must be taken to achieve the desired outcomes. These outcomes impact both Wheel-Trans operations as well as the customer. The eligibility initiative is the first, and I will also speak about family of services, customer relations, community and stakeholder engagement, and also changes to operations management. Changes to eligibility is the first critical activity for Wheel-Trans, and we've met with the other North American operators as well as York Region, Oakville, Burlington, Milton, Peel Region, Durham, and Hamilton to understand what they had done, because all have already made their changes. Peel has just implemented their changes. So we revised the application processes and associated forms, and we identified impacts on other initiatives. The changes were done through using and with the support of subject matter experts from the TTC's Diversity and Human Rights Department, and human rights lawyers from the TTC's Legal Department have been heavily involved to make sure that the eligibility criteria, the forms, and the appeal process has been developed with the right lens. As well, ACAT, TTC's Advisory Committee on Accessible Transit, is also providing advice and recommending changes for the elimination of barriers just on the application form itself. So a key change in eligibility is really our focus. And today we focus on the mobility device itself. That's through the application process, the mobility device is what is awarded points and how the customer uses it. In the future, it's about the individual person's, the applicant's ability to use conventional transit. Eligibility will include cognitive, mental, and sensory disabilities, as well as physical disabilities. And disabilities may be permanent or temporary as identified under the Human Rights Code, but again, not limited to physical, sensory, cognitive, or mental. So the application form, the proposed form, will include an application to be filled out both by the applicant and his or her healthcare provider. The goal is to automatically approve a significant portion of the applicants without needing to send them for any kind of assessment. And that best practice says that we could be able to automatically approve around 75% of applicants. Pre-screening will not be required, but would offer the applicant an opportunity to self-assess prior to filling out the application form. The appeal process will change and will be formalized. The applicant will fill in a standardized appeal form, and the appeal panel will see the original application, the appeal form, and the original functional cognitive assessment. We're still developing what the composition of the appeal panel would be, but we are looking to include an occupational physical therapist. So it's not just somebody from the TTC, but it would be a panel of experts to review any additional information the customer wanted to provide. We also wanted to bring information today on what family of services mean, and that the TTC currently operates a family of services with its subway network, streetcar, bus, and community bus, as well as Wheel-Trans. The Wheel-Trans Family of Services initiative is about leveraging the existing accessible transportation options within the TTC to support the growing number of registered Wheel-Trans customers. This initiative will address a wide range of issues, including the implementation path, which routes and when can they come online, procedures for passenger handoff, ride booking and scheduling, as well as the travel assist or travel support program to assist individual customers with using the conventional system if they want to and if they can. A pilot is scheduled for early 2017 and would initially involve volunteer customers using candidate routes. We will be consulting, of course, with our ACAT committee through the pilot, and members of the Disability Accessibility Inclusion Committee you can volunteer to be part of the pilot and make sure that you give us tips on what we're doing right, where we need to make improvements. Our goal is to leverage all accessible modes of transportation to support our customers, as well as the significant investment the city has made in making the TTC accessible. As far as the Customer Relations Initiative goes, Wheel-Trans differs somewhat from the broader TTC in that it has a much more intimate relationship with our customers. Our customer base, while sharing common desires with the broader population, such as independence and spontaneity of travel, brings an additional set of needs. These twin requirements necessitate an extra focus on the customer relationship that goes deeper than that of the conventional system. Policies related to requirements for same-day service bookings, as well as the late cancellation no-show policy, will be part of the review. The Community and Stakeholder Relations Initiative focuses on the fact that Wheel-Trans is facing unprecedented transformation in a relatively short period of time. Key to making this sustainable transition is timely and consistent communication with affected stakeholders. The initiative will be responsible for establishing and executing an overall communication strategy that builds upon the central theme of building and promoting independence for our riders. And we are reaching out to our community right now through the TTC's website, editorial pieces, newsletters, handouts, and special events. And we can provide content and speakers if there's other recommendations for other events that we should be attending. The Operations Management Initiative is critical for us to support our growing number of customers and successfully implement the family of services. The focus of this initiative is on our own internal processes and the technology we use to deliver on our new mandate. We need to develop tools to help us manage our customer relations and help our customers work more effectively with us in the way that they want to plan their trips. The opportunity to help us understand our customers better and help better plan for the future. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Eve. That was a fairly detailed presentation. I do appreciate that you are coming back to our committee after seeing us not too long ago. And it's nice to see some of those updates and revisions. I want to open the floor to our committee members for questions of Eve. Hands are going up, definitely. Joe, and then Tracy, and Darren, and Terry Lynn. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, thank you for the report. Just a question about the application process. You mentioned that form, it's a form, the application form. Will you have an alternative method, like an online way of applying, because you said 75%?
Joe, are you speaking into your speaking into the microphone? Is it lit?
Yeah, it's on. I guess I don't speak that loudly, sorry. So there'll be an alternative process other than just the form. You just mentioned 75% of applications are likely to be automatically approved anyway, so having an online method would be a little bit easier.
So through the chair, yes, the term or the use of the term form is more about the series of questions that it would be, and that our intention is to provide it in whatever accessible format is necessary in order for persons to have their healthcare provider complete something or fill in something. There might be some need to provide paper, but we're not, like, we will use whatever method is the most easily used by customers, and then that we can get it. The bottom line is we need to get the information we need to make that assessment and quickly move somebody through the process of registration. So yes, point taken. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Joe. Tracy to ask questions.
Yes, I've got a couple of questions. I'm still not quite clear on your presentation, and perhaps this is still something you're consulting about and figuring out, on what the conditional criteria will be. You know, so I'm just not sure what that means and who's going to decide the conditions are right on any given day for a person to use it, right? So, you know, I know many people that in the summertime, they might be able to take an accessible regular bus to go where they're going, but that might not be possible on a different kind of weather day or with their own abilities on that particular day, right? If they feel that they can manage it or not. So I'm just not quite sure, A, what those conditions would be, and B, who's going to decide. I guess one of my fears is that someone's just going to say, oh, you can do it, and then that's it, and you don't have a choice. And, you know, your transportation options will feel very limited. So that's the one question. And the second question, just in thinking from the customer experience side of things, with the family of service, if, say, a Wheel-Trans vehicle is going to pick someone up, get them to the nearest accessible subway stop, and then at the other end, Wheel-Trans is picking them up to get them to where they're going. It might sound good because it's only 5 kilometers or whatever on Wheel-Trans each way, but it's still, I presume, going to be multiple pickups. People could be on the bus for some time before they get to the subway, and then on the Wheel-Trans bus again for some time at the other end. So I'm just wondering if there's been thought given to what the total, like what the parameters will be for the total ride time duration. Right now, there's a policy of about 90 minutes, which is hard to stick to. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes people are on board longer for various reasons, but at least there's a goal of 90 minutes that's considered reasonable. And I'm wondering if that 90 minutes, you know, how that could possibly apply to the whole, you know, ride duration from a customer point of view, or are people going to have to be factoring 3 hours, you know, to get somewhere at each end of their trip, which is really not good.
Thank you. Through the chair, to answer your first question about conditional and who makes the decision, the customer will make that decision. The customer will decide and inform us via the, again, through the application process and through the assessment process, if necessary, is what those conditions are. And so when could, if there is a proposed question of when could you use conventional, and that's the customer that decides, I can use conventional when the weather is good. I cannot use conventional when there's snow on the ground. Or I have a good day, bad day disability, therefore I can use it when I feel good. So again, it will be the customer that will make that decision. On both sides, I don't want to put the customer and I don't want to put our reservationists in the position to get into that conflict. Your point is very well taken that it's not about forcing the customer, it's again about giving the customer the options and the choice, and that if the customer says, I need this, and that's why the registration process is so critical, that we fully complete this, and really the registration of conditions is about what type of trips does the system offer. Because a condition could also be, I can't go underground. So then the system shouldn't be offering journeys that would include a subway or the new Eglinton LRT in the future. So that's more the idea of collection of the information, is about what kind of information should the system be offering to the reservationist to offer to the customer, but in the end, it's the customer's choice. And to your second point, so the total parameters, again, I take your point, yes, it's 90 minutes is the current policy. We haven't looked to change that at this time. That will be part of our discussions of what is a reasonable journey that the system will build, and then we will set the parameters around it, again, with consultation of ACAT, because you're right, there is a time limit now. We are trying to have it as closely aligned with conventional. It's not a direct as the crow flies time, but it is based on a reasonable conventional route time, but then without putting somebody what's a normal time, and then without putting somebody to undue hardship of how long they should be essentially trapped on a vehicle. So point taken on both sides. Thank you.
Our next person to question is Darren.
Thank you for your presentation. I found it very informative. I have a two-part question. You had mentioned that you're in the process of establishing an appeals panel. I'm just wondering, how do you currently address appeals that are received, and who's responsible for rendering a decision on those appeals?
Through the chair, the appeal panel presently is that the customer is resent for another evaluation with a different group. So they're taken through the same list of application questions in person that they would have been done the first time to see if their result is different. So rather than putting somebody, the proposal for the new panel is that we wouldn't put somebody through another assessment. We really would just look at the criteria plus any further information that the customer wanted to provide. It's less impacting on the customer that they're not forced to, with a different group of people, answer the same questions where the answers, they might come up with the same answers again.
Just a follow-up question. Do you have a timeline in terms of when the panel will be established?
We need to have the whole process established by the time we launch new eligibility, so prior to January 1, 2017. So within the next few months, we have to put that together.
Great, thanks, Darren. Terry Lynn to ask questions.
I have two questions. And one is, why do people have to re-register? That was one question that came up to me if you're a pre-existing customer. And the other question is, what would be the benefits of the pre-screen?
Through the chair, why do people have to re-register? So that we capture the same information about them that other customers have, so that we're able to schedule and offer the same kind of trips, depending if somebody right now is just a permanent, that if they might find that they use the conventional system, they would move into the conditional category. And then when we offer the trips, the trip offerings would be based on, again, their conditions and their preferences. So it really is about just capturing new information. We are developing the most fair and, again, least intrusive way to do that. There would be some customers that would be considered permanent and would move to unconditional. Those really aren't the ones that we want to have the conversation with, but there are those, we know some of our customers do take the conventional system. We want to make sure that we offer that in the way that they want it to be offered, so that in future their trips could be booked and scheduled. And when it becomes even more automated that we're not doing the offering, the system needs to present to the customer when they're booking themselves. It needs to present them with offerings that they would accept and not offerings that they wouldn't even consider. And then to answer your second question, the benefits of pre-screen really is more as an optional process for the customer to take, and it serves as a point of information. Would I be at all eligible? It's certainly not mandatory, and it really is more of an information piece about what Wheel-Trans services would be.
Any other questions? No? Okay, so Rahima, please.
Some of my questions were already answered. I just want to know about the reassessment about current customers over the 3-year period timeline. When will this start, and how long would the process take for an individual?
Through the chair, we will start in 2017 and continue. We think it'll take us about 3 years to get through. By that time, we'll probably be up at around 50,000 registrants up under the old system. So it'll probably take time to go through that. And again, we have not developed what the process of re-registration is. Unfortunately, right now, we're focused on new eligibility and what the new process looks like. So we will take our time to make sure that we get that right, again, in consultation with our ACAC committee.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wendy, please.
Thank you for your presentation and for coming back to talk to us again, and for clarifying a number of the questions I think we had discussed previously. So I have a few questions that relate specifically to the pilot. So one of them is, when will not predefined routes be tested, and how are you managing to factor that into the evaluation of the system? My concern is that, if you're talking about predefined routes, that you'll have pretty positive results from your pilot. But in fact, in reality, when people are actually using the system, they may encounter difficulties that they don't encounter on that particular pilot. And secondly, you've spoken about volunteers being involved in that pilot. Are the volunteers to be compensated for their time if they're taking part? Those are my two questions.
Great, good questions.
Through the chair, so when will we going to not predefined routes? That's a very interesting question because we know our customers now are booking trips to take themselves to a subway station or to a bus station. We know that's happening. And we would consider that already a family of services journey. As far as when will we not predefine routes, I would like to say, I don't know that I want that to happen. I would like to say that the importance is that we carefully control what we're doing. We carefully control that we don't put a customer on a route where we can't confidently say, all the bus operators, for example, have been trained, that we can't confidently say that the stops are accessible or enough of the stops are accessible. So we don't want to just send customers out, although at their own choice they would, but we wouldn't necessarily use it as part of the pilot offerings. The idea is that then we could control where the pickup and drop-off points are and that we can more closely manage that. We will not seek to turn or convert as much of our trips initially into family of services trips. We're starting very slow with a goal of 1% of all trips next year being a family of services trip. So if our trips next year are over 4 million, just 1% of 4 million isn't that many. Again, so that we can learn from it. And we might learn that we should never send somebody out on a route that we're not prepared for. So the pilot is really for our learning of the best way to structure that and the best way that we need to set up the software to book the trips and communicate to the customers what family of service is about, and also the travel assist program, what we might need to make sure is included. And then your second question on volunteers, it's about volunteers, Wheel-Trans customers who are volunteering to combine their journeys. So their normal trip would be an A to B point-to-point trip. And if they would like to volunteer as my normal journey includes a designated route, and would they like to participate in that? So we weren't assuming that there would need to be a payment process as the exchanges that we still guarantee that we get them to their destination.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Members to speak? Terry Lynn, go ahead.
I asked questions earlier specifically about, there was a question about the pre-screen, but also why do people have to re-register? And I could be off base here, truly this is not my strength, but I'm kind of looking at it from a cost-benefit analysis. It just seems like a huge endeavor and expensive to re-register existing customers. I'm wondering if that could, I'm leaning towards, without having all the information fairly, I'm leaning towards cutting that process out entirely. It doesn't seem like necessary. I'm glad that the pre-screen is not mandatory. And I guess I feel like if I don't say everything, other folks are going to pick up on these things, but a couple of things. I wouldn't want to have a pilot that's so engineered, because regular transit users of the TTC of Wheel-Trans that have disabilities, we come across bumps and bruises all the time, sometimes quite literally. And if the purpose of the pilot is to see where the problems might arise, the pilot shouldn't be designed to be problem-free in any way. The other thing too is that if you're asking for volunteers to participate in these new projects where they're not getting door-to-door point of service, and you are asking for feedback, compensation for those volunteers is pertinent. Like it needs to happen, because if you're not seeking their feedback, then you're not actually, the point is moot. So I would encourage the TTC to look at definitely the requirement to re-register just seems like it's going to cause a lot more problems and be potentially very expensive than just registering new customers for these services.
Thank you very much, Terry Lynn. Anyone else to speak? No, Wendy.
Hi there, I'd just like to touch on the two questions that I asked as well, and just to echo some of what Terry Lynn had said. And I'm not sure if I've missed this in translation or not, but to me, you know, again, if the pilot is so engineered that you're really only looking at predefined routes, and I think that's part of it, because you do have to make sure that people are not ending up in situations where they are trapped or stuck or, you know, sitting at the side of the road for multiple hours. That is definitely not something that you want to do. But if the intention of the system overall is for people to have spontaneity, free movement, and a fully accessible system, at some point, I would think that you would want to consider having an evaluation strategy that allows people with disabilities to behave with the system in the same way that people without disabilities behave with the system, which is to decide now that you want to go out and use the TTC to go from A to B in the way that everybody else operates in the system. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm encouraging you to think about that element of spontaneity and freedom of movement that underpins the principles that you were presenting here today, and understand where, at what point in your pilot do you transition to those being the actual principles, and you demonstrate that that's possible for people with disabilities to do. And the second point, just to come back to what Terry Lynn said, and also my question around the volunteers, is I'd just like to reiterate that if people are volunteering their time and they're providing you with feedback, it is considered customary to provide them with some kind of compensation. So if you're doing any kind of research typically, and you're asking people to provide you with their time, and thinking about a problem that you're trying to solve, you do generally offer them a gift card or some kind of financial compensation. So if I could also just, you know, underscore that that's an important piece of this, particularly because, you know, you're also talking about people with disabilities who are not compensated in lots of other ways. So you can be talking about people who are unemployed, who are on ODSP, who don't have access to other forms of remuneration anyway. So, thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Any other speakers? No? Okay. Terry Lynn, the second time we're going to have to get all your comments into one package the first time. Okay, I'm going to give you a minute, okay?
I do apologize, I am trying.
Okay.
I just wanted to say too, and I think a huge challenge that the TTC has right now, and I will say that this has been reflected in my travel experience, is that the shelters are not accessible, the wait areas are not accessible, and that's like a huge consideration for many, many people with disabilities. And so I just want to flag it again because it is so important.
Thank you. And succinct to the point. Are you guys tag teaming me? Okay, go ahead, Wendy.
Sorry, I should have added this to my last point, and I actually had it written down, so my apologies for leaving it out. I've been talking to people in my sort of circle about the family of services approach, and this is completely anecdotal, but it reflects some of the comments that we had last time around education. One of the things that I still can't quite get my head around, and a number of other people that I speak to, is the challenge around somebody with a disability who might be using a wheelchair at rush hour actually getting onto a subway train. This is, I think, a fundamental part of being able to access the TTC, particularly if you're using it for employment. You would be traveling at times where, you know, you have high volumes of people in the system. There is something that is not happening for people who are regular users of the TTC around the priority blue seats for people, around even just moving out of the way so somebody in a wheelchair can get on to the car. And that, I'm just talking about a very limited, you know, experience of using transit during high volume periods. My recommendation is that, and I think we talked about this last time, that there be conscious thought put into some kind of an educational strategy, both for drivers, for people who work on the TTC, and for customers of the TTC, around what is going to be needed when people with disabilities really are being filtered into the standard system. Because currently, there is, in my opinion, a real lack of understanding around those particular issues. And in practice, that could be the biggest downfall to you trying to actually have an integrated approach, aside from the delays around accessibility of stations.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for those comments. And if there's no further comments, then I'd like to just move to receive the presentation for information. Okay, thank you very much, Terry Lynn. And thank you, Eve, for coming back to our committee. We know that the work that you have underway is very important, and as you can tell for the members of the committee, it's also important for them that we get this right. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have one final item. If you recall, it was added to the agenda, and we are going to call upon, I believe, this is item number 6. It is. Sorry, I'm trying. The Universal Design and New Residential Construction. We have a presentation from the Older Women's Network, as well as the Association of Design Professionals for Accessibility. Just being mindful of time, and I know that, come on up, Ronnie. Just being mindful of time, I know that some of the members will not be able to stay for the full presentation and perhaps not participate in the discussions. Ronnie, you have a slide presentation that you've prepared for us that is several pages long. I'm going to give you the same 10 minutes that we provide all our presenters. So hopefully you can sort of get your message into that time slot.
Thanks.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning. I think I can help resolve this. Councillor Wong Tam and members of the committee. I'm here from the Older Women's Network, which has been a voice for midlife and older women since 1988. And we have a partner organization, which my partner should be sitting here, but her son had his graduation this morning. She thought it was tomorrow, so we didn't know, and so unfortunately she couldn't make it. And so I'm sad to say, but I think it'll probably be better for you people that we don't have that slide presentation now. I could give you a few highlights of what we're trying to achieve, our goal, and some of the things we're doing, and then leave it to you to decide if you want to hear the presentation at the next meeting, possibly, or however you want to do it. You've got it in writing, you've got it in paper, but.
Sure, I just want to point to the members is that the presentation is actually on paper. It's directly in front of you. I know that it's not going to help some of our members, and I think that if there is a way to.
Wasn't it sent online to people?
Yeah, no, yes, but in terms of memorizing the entire presentation, it is rather.
Oh, no. We would love to come back.
I just wanted to acknowledge that it was sent. It was sent to you electronically, but you also have a paper copy of it today. I don't expect anyone to have memorized it, but Ronnie, please speak to it.
Right, okay, so the Older Women's Network has been advocating for affordable housing and many other things for many years. And we've done lots of reports, studies across the province about housing needs, and I'm focusing on housing because that's what we're talking about, universal design. And we're actually limiting it to multi-unit buildings and new construction because we want to be realistic and what's achievable. So we have come to the conclusion that we need to make some radical changes in the way we design new buildings. And so our initiative is to promote universal design, and far from it being something completely radical and new, we have been, in our research, we know that there has been across the world a lot more going on than what we have here in Canada, because I'm just going to mention that Norway have been working to achieve universal design by 2025. So they're working on that, at raising awareness. And Singapore has a government fund for accessibility to support modifying existing structures to make them more accessible. that, you know, it's a step. And Ireland has a Centre of Excellence in Universal Design, supporting professional development by integrating universal design principles into curricula. So there are initiatives happening all over the world, and we're saying, you know, in Canada, our actual federal housing standards have not, or exclude, believe it or not, the National Building Code excludes housing from their provisions. So housing is not, you can discriminate in housing by not making it accessible, but all other public buildings have to be. So, so our aim is really to get to change the Ontario Building Code. That's what we want to start with. And so we're reaching out to politicians and policymakers, and particularly architects and developers, to try to raise their awareness and make, hopefully make them come on board, to realize that it is far cheaper to build something from scratch with universal design than to renovate or rehabilitate old buildings. I'm sure you all know this. I'm sure you've had other presentations about design, and your knowledge is quite extensive, so I'm not going to go into detail. That's what this presentation was going to be. But I did want to mention a couple of things that we're doing. We've had a meeting with the Daniels developer, which, you know, showed us that there is some movement. They actually have their own, the Daniels Corporation, they have their own development innovation department for well, they call it, I'm not sure exactly what they call it, but it's on accessibility. And they've already incorporated a lot of features in their buildings, not in terms of you know, full access, but wider doorways, and some of their projects, they're trying out new things, and they asked us to actually be helpful to them in terms of what we think is a, you know, are good things that they should be incorporating. And we've also made a presentation to the Affordable Housing Committee, which seemed to be receptive to this idea that universal design could be something that they aim towards. So they actually made some motion about considering this, which we were very pleased to, you know, it was extremely helpful to us to know that the city, you know, that some of the politicians are becoming more and more conscious of that. One of the councillors asked us to help him with some of his work in the community. And we have Thea Curdy, our partner here, who's supposed to be here, Association of Design Professionals for Accessibility, is truly an absolute expert on this whole topic. She works for a company that does this during the day. They do audits of buildings, public buildings mainly, but you know, she has been working on this for over 10 years, and she's well familiar. She helps develop the standards and for different municipalities too in Ontario. So I mean, it's just very encouraging. We've started this about, I'd say, 8 months ago, and we've come quite a distance already, and we're planning a big event in the fall, hopefully by late fall, that we would invite politicians and developers, and we would like some champions too, you know, developers and other people to be champions for this. So this is what we're aiming for, to get some momentum, and in the event that we come back to you, we'll give you more details. We haven't set any date or anything, but hopefully we would encourage you to take part. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ronnie. And are there any questions for Ronnie? I have a couple of questions. Ronnie, I recognize that the literature that you sent forward was specifically targeting making amendments to the provincial building code to ensure that all new design and all new construction was going to reflect accessibility.
Well, we're really talking about multiple.
Yeah, can you clarify, because you're only asking for changes in multiple unit residential buildings?
Right. Well, we had to narrow it down because we really don't know. I mean, the whole thing the Older Women's Network, most of the women live in apartments, and OWN has been, working with women all over in different parts of the city, but we're not tending to find our members living in detached homes, and so they're older and people have downsized. And we just think that there's such a boom in terms of building apartments, and what happens is they're becoming smaller rather than making accommodations. So we feel that we should put the emphasis on the multi-unit buildings. I think it's a lot easier to build accessible single homes than it is apartments. I mean, in terms of the cost of, the land and everything. So we have found that there are, there's always going to be resistance on the part of developers, but we want to, try to initiate this, or how do I say, make it more likely that they will listen. I don't know if I'm explaining it properly, but we did narrow it down. That's why, I think it's big enough. I think this is the bigger part to tackle.
Okay,
the
and
apartments.
so recognizing that, and I thank you for that that answer. I do certainly appreciate that there are times advocacy organizations and groups, we have to be strategic on what we ask for, so we can be, we may set the table for the second round of requests. So again, referring to the I guess almost the letter that you have, are you asking this committee for an endorsement of the campaign?
Yeah, well, that would be I think anything that you can do to give us support and to further this initiative. It shouldn't just be our initiative. We want to be able to say that this is something that there's a need for, that we've shown that there's a need. So if anyone would like to participate, I know Rahima's on our group and other people who would be interested. Certainly an endorsement would be very much appreciated. But anything else that is as a committee that you can do, we'd love to hear, or we'd love to have your support.
Okay. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Terry Lynn, go ahead.
I guess I feel like Kristen, you might be working on a motion with Janice. So I'm wondering, I want to support the idea of, well, let me back this up. Part of your report was also about aging in place. I did read that. I don't have the report in front of me, but I think maybe a more robust motion would be to make sure that the city supports housing being in the national building code initiatives.
Oh, no.
Because that's broader, it's not a whole lot different. And I think, in the service of accessibility, it would leave that motion up to more people potentially. However, I do have a question, though, more for Janice and for Kristen about, I know we're city services, and this is like a different level of policy, but I think we can still support, national initiatives, right?
I believe the request is to, the advocacy program and campaign is to amend the provincial building code, which guides all construction and design in Ontario, especially with respect to the multi-residential units. Perhaps what I can do is maybe I can table the motion I have. I don't want to lose too many people. We need 7 for quorum, but I also don't want Ronnie to leave our committee empty-handed. She has sat through 3 hours of other people's presentations, and I think the request that you have is fairly straightforward. So
I can, if there's any way that I can help clarify it, I can get back to you.
Sure.
But if you'd like to, you know, in terms of which level, if we're only asking for the provincial, I think it is, but I'm not positive.
I think the experience that we have at the City of Toronto is that the way Toronto goes, Ontario goes, and national housing codes have generally been amended because of emergency measures or changes to the code. I'll just give you an example. We had a situation with falling glass, if you recall. It seemed like one summer glass was raining across the city. We made some emergency amendments and recommendations to the province. They took them up very quickly, and I know that sort of set off a conversation and a change of things afterwards. So what I wanted to do is to make sure that we are able to at least provide some support, even if it's symbolic support to the Older Women's Network and to the Association of Design Professionals for Accessibility. We can always, I can table the motion, you can take a look if you want to change the language, we can do that as well. And I'm just going to put this on.
I guess my only suggestion would be, I don't think it needs to say multi-residential buildings. I think it can just say residential buildings. Would that be a loss? I feel like that wouldn't necessarily be a loss.
Yeah, no, I was just borrowing the language of the campaign
Yeah.
and the letter itself. I wanted to make sure that we were going to fall in line with what they're asking for. But if we were to remove the language, I'm just going to read it because I'm going to table the motion and read it and then address Terry Lynn's comment. So my motion is that the Disabilities Access and Inclusion Advisory Committee endorse the campaign to promote universal design in construction of all new multi-residential buildings and to support the objectives to amend the provincial building code to ensure accessibility and inclusivity for all. So if it's a matter of striking the words multi-residential, I can do that.
I don't see any, I think it would be all right. I mean, it wouldn't make it any less. It would certainly make it broader, so.
Okay, so we'll do that.
This is a colleague from my committee. She's saying it wouldn't pass. I don't know what the, I don't know. I think, I'd love to say, you know, just go ahead and do this and.
Well, no, I think there's going to be two things for us to consider. One is for us to make sure that we provide language in a motion of some type of support statement that will be useful to you,
Exactly,
as opposed to setting you off on a different course. All of a sudden, you have to respond to something that you're not prepared to. So if it's, and I know sometimes we love to reach. I'm always taking on more than I can, but we want to be helpful and not hurtful to your campaign. And I did take it out specifically from the language of your letter. So
I think that's the way it's going. Yeah, I think that's what we're striving for, because we're looking for, you know, we're definitely focusing on apartments and
okay, so
apartment
maybe what
building.
I can do is I'll stand by the motion, and there is one other thing I'll advise the committee, and Nicole has brought this up to my attention, is that this committee may not be able to actually make those recommendations and endorsements. So if we are procedurally out of order, because basically our recommendations will go to City Council, right? It goes to the executive and goes to City Council. If we're procedurally out of order, if we're actually overreaching the scope of the committee, they'll let us know.
All right.
So to make it more palatable, I'd suggest that we probably stay with the language of the motion. Okay. Any questions of myself as the mover of this motion? Seeing none, anyone to speak to this item?
Just really, really quick.
Okay, Terry Lynn and then Darren.
I guess the multi versus residential, it's not really my idea per se. I was just also trying to speak to the part in the report that was talking about aging in place. That's all. But yes, if this makes it easier for it to pass, I don't have an issue, but I was trying to work those things out in my head. That's all.
Darren.
And maybe Nicole can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe Section 3.8 of the Ontario Building Code and the amendments that were put in place January 1st, 2015, already speak to accessibility within multi-level residences. So I'm wondering if we need to include that or if we can just endorse the campaign that's before us.
Gee, again, I'm wishing Theo was here because I don't know.
Actually, Ronnie, don't worry, because Nicole is going to try to answer that question. The question is actually for staff now.
So thank you, Darren. You're correct. The amendments to Section 3.8 of the Ontario Building Code have specific requirements for new construction and renovation. They do differentiate between different size of buildings, but any building with more than, or any suite with more than 300 square feet would have to comply with the full Section 3.8 amendments, whereas any suite under 300 square meters would have limited requirements to comply with the Section 3.8.
Okay, so I think what we can do is, the motion is sweeping and general enough that it actually catches everything. So if the code has been amended and it actually stipulates some conditions for requirements, I think we can all pretty much agree at this committee, is that we don't want any exemptions to the rule. We want and that's the whole purpose of universal design, is that everything we should think through, we should make it as widely accessible and usable for everyone.
Exactly.
Okay. You want to speak again?
No, I just realized I never even said that we call our campaign Living in Place rather than Aging in Place, because we were including everyone. So living in place. And you've got the, you're very right in what you're saying, and I really appreciate that you made this effort to accommodate us. I just hope that if there's any need to make any changes, please let us know, and and we can also communicate back to you if there's any reason why this, I think you're doing the right thing, though. Thank you.
Supporting you is the right thing that we're doing. So I'm just going to amend my own motion and add the word endorse the Living in Place campaign, so we're very clear on which campaign it is that we're endorsing. All those in favor? Okay, so passed and adopted. Thank you very much. This pretty much concludes the end of our meeting. We want to thank our clerks, Janice, and the staff who are here, and of course Nicole for always being so helpful and able to provide really great technical answers on the fly without much looking up of anything. And we'll see you folks in September. Have a fantastic summer. There's a lot to do in the city, and I'm sure I'll see you out in the communities. Okay, thank you.